The Force is old and full of shadows.
The smell reaches her first, sulfur and scorched flesh and something beneath both. A wrongness that has no name in any language she knows. Only a vibration in her mantrals that she has been feeling since she woke screaming on the transport 4 hours ago. The bond she thought she severed when she walked out of the temple. The bond that apparently never listened. Mustafar is not a planet. It is a wound. The lava rivers carve through the obsidian landscape like open veins, and the sky above them is the color of a bruise that never heals, orange-black, choked with particulate ash that drifts in slow obscene curtains across the ridge. The heat is a physical weight. It pushes down on her chest, her shoulders, the back of her neck, like a hand trying to press her into the ground. She runs anyway. The skiff docked at the upper landing pad 3 minutes ago, and she was out before the ramp fully descended, pushing past a droid that tried to flag her for the passenger manifest. She followed the bond like a wire pulled taut through the center of her chest, across the upper platform, down the exterior stairs, onto the black shore of the lava river, where the rock is still warm from tremors that passed an hour ago. She hears Obi-Wan before she sees either of them. His voice carries up the ridge in fragments, broken, stripped of the measured Coruscant cadence she has heard her whole life. "You were the chosen one," he is saying, or has said, the words trailing into something shapeless at the end. "It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them." She crests the ridge. Below her, on the narrow shelf of black rock between the slope and the river's edge, Anakin Skywalker is on fire. Her mantrals ring like struck metal. The feedback through the bond is not sound and not sensation. It is simply volume. A signal turned so far past its tolerance that it stops being information and becomes pure, undifferentiated pain. She has felt him angry before. She has felt him grief-stricken, terrified, ruthless, joyful. She has never felt anything like this. What is burning on that rock is not the boy who taught her to fly in formation. It is something that used to be him. Obi-Wan's voice again, quieter now, and somehow worse for it. "I loved you." He turns. He begins walking up the slope, and his face, when she sees it, is doing that thing, that Jedi stillness, assembled over something that is clearly breaking apart behind it. Mortar pressed into cracks that are too wide. His eyes are red. He is crying without his face showing it, which is one of the most terrible things she has ever seen. He sees her. He stops. Ahsoka, not a greeting. A warning. Where is he? She is already moving past him. He catches her arm. "Don't." His grip is firm and she can feel the tremor in it. That is not him anymore. The boy we knew is dead. She looks at his hand on her arm. She looks at his face. She hears the way his voice cracked on the word dead. The slight upward break at the consonant's end. The breath snatched in after. And she knows with cold certainty that he does not believe what he just said. He is reciting it. He is reciting it the way you recite something you need to be true. She rips her arm free. "He's your brother." She says it straight into his face, close enough that the ash between them stirs. "Look at him." She does not wait for his answer. The slope is loose volcanic glass and packed ash, and it slides under her boots on the way down. Something cuts through the sole near her heel. She barely registers it. The heat is extraordinary this close to the river. She can feel it on her lekku, her face, the backs of her hands, the air she breathes going in dry and coming out drier. She runs down the slope, toward the burning shape on the rock, and does not stop. She has felt the dark side before. She has stood in rooms with it, trained adjacent to it, touched its edges in her worst moments. What radiates from Anakin now is not an edge. It is an ocean with no surface. She drops to her knees beside him, plants both palms flat, and pushes. Not at him. At the air around him. A wide sustained press, the force used not as a blow but as a seal, compressing inward from all sides, starving the flame of what it needs. She learned this in the field, in a burning gunship, from a medic who had learned it from someone else. She holds the push and does not let it collapse, and the fire dies in sections, trailing, guttering. Anakin snarls. It is not a human sound. It comes from somewhere low in the chest, automatic, animal. A reflex from whatever has been living in his body for the last several hours. His mechanical arm lifts and she feels the dark side spike, a clumsy, half-conscious reach for her throat. The grip finds her, squeezes once, and then falls away. He has nothing left to sustain it. She grabs him. This is not graceful. This is not the kind of moment anyone would choose to be in. She gets both arms under his shoulders and hauls, and he is heavier than he looks even like this. And the stumps of his legs scrape across the rock in a way she does not let herself think about. He thrashes. His head connects with her collarbone hard enough to make her eyes water. "I've got you," she says, because she needs to say something, and this is the only thing that is true. "I've got you. I'm not leaving. I'm not." She stops herself before the rest of it comes out. She is not him. She is not Obi-Wan. She is not going to walk up that slope and leave him burning on a rock and call it mercy. He makes a sound that is not a word. It comes out wet and torn, and she does not know if it is rage or grief or something that has stopped being either. "I know," she tells him. His weight shifts against her, not cooperation, not yet. Just the body's animal recognition that something is trying to hold it rather than hurt it. He shudders. The force around him is still dark, still churning, but the screaming edge of it recedes 1 degree. 1 degree is enough. She gets her feet under her. She starts pulling him up the slope. The ash slides. She finds her footing on a shelf of solid rock, loses it, finds it again. Her arms are burning. The heat from the river pushes against her back like a second body trying to drag them both down. She does not stop. She does not look back at the river. She looks at the top of the ridge, and the silhouette at the top of it, and she pulls. She is aware, distantly, that she is crying. Not from grief, or not only from grief, from the effort of it, from the heat, from the screaming in her montrals that hasn't stopped since she crested the ridge. Tears cut channels through the ash on her face. She doesn't bother wiping them. "I've got you," she says again, and again, and again. The mantra is not for him. It is a promise she is making to whatever is still listening inside what he has become. She doesn't know if anything is. She is here anyway. At the top of the ridge, Obi-Wan Kenobi stands frozen. He has not moved. He watched her run down the slope, and he watched her smother the fire, and he watched a 17-year-old girl refuse every lesson his order ever taught him about what is possible and what must be let go. And he has not moved. He watches her drag Anakin Skywalker up through the ash, inch by inch, refusing. His face does the stillness again. This time, something behind it is cracking open. He moves before he decides to. That is the only honest account of it. One moment Obi-Wan Kenobi is standing at the top of the ridge, with ash on his boots and a verdict in his chest, and the next he is on the slope, sliding on loose volcanic glass, catching himself with one hand, and reaching the other toward the shape that Ahsoka is hauling upward through the dark. He does not know what changed. He does not examine it. He gets his shoulder under Anakin's right side, and Ahsoka shifts to take the left, and together, without a word, without looking at each other, they carry what remains of him up the ridge. Anakin does not make it easy. He is not unconscious. That would be simpler. He is somewhere between, a half-lit state where the pain keeps breaking through whatever shock has mercifully blunted it, and each time it breaks through, the dark side surges with it. Not controlled. Not intentional. Just reflex, the way a wounded animal bites the hand pulling it from a trap. A force push radiates outward in an uncontrolled pulse, and Ahsoka staggers. A second one follows, and Obi-Wan's vision whites at the edges. They keep climbing. The skiff is on the upper pad, 40 meters above the river shelf, and every meter of that distance is a negotiation with the terrain. A tremor moves through the rock, deep, tectonic, the planet digesting itself, and a fissure opens 2 body lengths to their left, venting a column of superheated gas that smells like the inside of a furnace. They angle right without discussing it. Ahsoka's boot goes through a crust of cooled ash and she drops to one knee, and Obi-Wan takes the full weight for 3 seconds until she finds solid ground again. He doesn't comment. She doesn't thank him. There is no vocabulary for this yet. They reach the ramp. The skiff's interior is utilitarian Naboo design. Curved white walls already gray with ash tracked in from outside. A small medical kit bolted beneath the navigator's console. Emergency webbing along the port wall. Obi-Wan takes Anakin's weight alone for the seconds it takes Ahsoka to get ahead of them and pull the medical kit free. The kit hits the deck. She is already on her knees opening it before Obi-Wan has Anakin laid flat. She works like she has done this before, because she has. Pressure wraps, the wide ones. She doesn't look up. Her hands are already moving, assessing the stumps with a field medic's economy. No hesitation, no flinching, just information gathering. Both legs, proximal to the severance. The heat cauterized most of it, but the right side is still seeping. Obi-Wan stands over Anakin and does not move. Obi-Wan. Her voice cuts through, not cruel, precise, his pulse. Now, he goes to his knees. 2 fingers to the side of Anakin's neck, pressing into the ash and dried blood until he finds the artery. The pulse is there, rapid, thready, but present. He reports this. Ahsoka nods once and keeps rapping. The clinical rhythm of it reaches into his chest and locates something that was about to come apart, and steadies it. Not healed. Steadied. Elevate the stumps, she says. Use the supply case. And close the ramp. He does both. He does not think about the face beneath his hands as he slides the case beneath Anakin's legs. He focuses on the task, which is the only mercy available to him right now. Ahsoka tears a strip from her own legging, not a decision she pauses to make, just a thing her hands do, and adds it to the pressure wrap where the kit's supply runs short. She ties it. She moves up to the torso, checking the burn distribution across the chest and mechanical arm with careful, systematic touches. Her face is still streaked with ash. She hasn't wiped it. The ramp seals. Obi-Wan moves to the cockpit and lifts them off the pad without ceremony. Mustafar falls away beneath them, the lava rivers, the industrial structures, the black shore. And he does not look at it. He punches the coordinates for Polis Massa from memory and holds the throttle steady, and does not look at it. In the hold, Anakin makes a sound. It starts low, and then it builds, and it is not a word. It is just sound. Pain and rage, and something beneath both that Obi-Wan has no framework for, and does not want to have a framework for. The dark side spikes again. A navigation panel on the co-pilot console cracks cleanly down the center without being touched. Obi-Wan sets the autopilot. He goes back into the hold. Ahsoka looks up at him. Something passes between them. An acknowledgement that what they are about to attempt is not guaranteed to work, and they are going to attempt it anyway. He sits beside Anakin's head. He places 2 fingers against Anakin's temple. He breathes. This is not a technique with a formal name. It is adjacent to battle meditation, the same principle of projecting a mental state outward through the Force, creating resonance rather than combat, calm rather than coordination. A technique without a clear lineage, the kind of knowledge that assembles itself in healers and soldiers across enough years of sufficient need. He projects stillness. Not peace. He doesn't have peace to give. He projects the nearest available thing, which is exhaustion past the point of feeling, the flat quiet on the other side of catastrophe. He pushes it outward through 2 fingers against a burning temple, and breathes out slowly, and waits. Anakin's interior is not a place. It is a weather system. The fragment of it that bleeds through the contact is brief and disorienting, half impressions, not full images. Heat, a face that is Padmé's and then isn't. A mechanical hand that is his and then somebody else's. A voice repeating something in a register too low to parse, and underneath it, underneath all of it, underneath the dark side's churning and the animal pain and the fractured Sith rage, something small. Something that is still using Anakin Skywalker's voice. Saying nothing, just present. Still there. Obi-Wan pulls back from the contact before he can lose himself in it. His hands are shaking. He keeps them at Anakin's temple anyway. He keeps projecting the flat quiet. And slowly, not quickly, not cleanly, but slowly, the dark side stops surging. Ahsoka watches him from across the body between them. She does not say anything. She goes back to monitoring the pressure wraps, checking the pulse at 30-second intervals, adjusting Anakin's position fractionally to keep the stumps elevated. They work in silence for 7 minutes. The stars outside the viewport stretch and compress as the skiff jumps to hyperspace. The shuttle descends through Mustafar's upper atmosphere 20 minutes later. It is sleek and black, built for one passenger's specific requirements, and it does not announce itself with landing lights. It sets down on the upper pad with hydraulic precision, and the ramp lowers, and Darth Sidious walks out into the sulfur wind with his hands folded in his sleeves. He stops at the top of the ramp. He surveys. Black sand, the obsidian flat, the lava river below, indifferent, a widening dark stain cooling on the rock near the river's edge, too large to be anything other than what it is. Drag marks in the ash, 2 sets of boots and something heavier pulled between them, leading up the slope to the pad's edge. No skiff. He stands very still. His escort does not speak. Nobody speaks. The wind moves ash in curtains across the landing pad, and Darth Sidious stands in the center of it, and does the arithmetic, and arrives at the answer, and does not accept it. He does the arithmetic again. The answer is the same. What happens next is not performed for anyone's benefit. There is no one here whose perception of him he is managing. The force builds in the space around him without ceremony, not summoned, just rising, like pressure finding a crack, and then it releases. The obsidian shelf at the ramp's base fractures in a ragged line 4 meters long. A viewport on the shuttle's exterior cracks from corner to corner. Ash lifts in a ring around him and hangs in the air. It lasts 4 seconds. Then it stops. He smooths his sleeve. He breathes. He turns back toward the shuttle's interior, and his voice, when it comes, is the voice he uses in Senate chambers. Level, considered, a voice that has decided something. Then we will simply need to find him again. He boards the shuttle. The ramp rises. The ship lifts from the pad without lights and disappears into the bruised orange sky. And the ash settles back over the drag marks, and the dark stain cools on the rock below, and Mustafar continues burning as it always has. It does not care who won. Polis Massa is a silence with walls around it. The asteroid outpost exists in the kind of deep space quiet that has no weather, no wind, no animal noise to fill the gaps between sounds. Just the recycled hum of life support, the soft percussion of medical equipment, and the particular acoustic quality of stone corridors carved into rock that has not moved in 400 million years. It is, Ahsoka thinks, the wrong place to be born. It is also the wrong place to die. They come in hard and fast on emergency approach, and the docking bay crew, bail Organa's contacts, quiet people with careful eyes, scramble to receive them before the ramp is fully down. Burn victim, Ahsoka calls out before anyone asks. 3 amputations, cauterized, severe respiratory involvement, possible smoke inhalation. He needs a ray-shielded bed and a surgical droid in the next 4 minutes. The dock coordinator, a human woman, mid-50s, gray hair cropped close, looks at the figure on the stretcher they've improvised from the skiff's emergency webbing. Her eyes take inventory. Burns, stumps, the mechanical arm still attached, the face beneath the ash and blood. She does not recognize him yet. She is looking at a body in critical condition, which is its own category of emergency, separate from identity. Bay 3, she says, and the team moves. Obi-Wan carries the front of the stretcher. Ahsoka carries the rear. They have not spoken for the last 40 minutes of the flight, not from hostility, just from the particular exhaustion that settles over people who have been running on emergency chemistry and have nothing left for words. They carry Anakin through the bay doors, down the corridor, through a set of sliding panels, into the medical wing. That is when Ahsoka sees Padmé. She is already here. Of course she is. The senator's ship faster, the route more direct, and she is in the bay at the end of the corridor, separated from Ahsoka by 30 meters of white corridor and a transparent steel partition. She is alive. She is not well. The medical droids clustered around her have the focused, economical movement of machines responding to something urgent. Ahsoka's feet slow for a moment. Then Bay 3 opens on her left, and the surgical team is calling for her, and she goes through the door. The next hour is a negotiation with competing catastrophes. In Bay 3, the medical droids work on Anakin with the relentless efficiency of systems that do not feel the weight of who they are treating. The dock coordinator assigns a senior droid surgeon and 2 assistants. The burn assessment takes 11 minutes. The amputation site sealing takes 23. Ahsoka stands at the bay's edge and watches and periodically answers questions. How long was he exposed? Did he lose consciousness during transport? Any seizure activity, with the clipped precision of someone who has been answering triage questions since she was 14 years old. The burn window was short. The droid surgeon's report reflects this with clinical neutrality: severe 2nd and 3rd degree burns across the torso, back, and remaining limb. The respiratory tract showing heat-related inflammation, but no full scarring. No vocoder necessary. No full life support indicated. The voice, if he survives, will be his own. Ahsoka receives this information and files it in the part of herself that is still functioning and does not examine what it costs to hear it. The dock coordinator appears at the bay entrance. Her face has changed. She has, in the intervening hour, looked at the face beneath the ash and arrived at recognition and carried it here like something she doesn't know how to set down. She says nothing. She looks at Ahsoka. Ahsoka meets her eyes. "I know," Ahsoka says. The coordinator nods once and leaves. She goes to Padmé between droid updates. She does not let herself call it splitting her attention, because that framing implies she can be fully in one place, and she cannot. Not today. Perhaps not ever again. Padmé is conscious when Ahsoka enters. Barely her eyes track across the room and find Ahsoka's face, and something in them: relief, anguish. A question she is too exhausted to fully form, moves like light through shallow water. "Is it true?" Padmé says. Her voice is almost nothing. "Is he?" "He's in the next bay." Ahsoka sits beside her, takes her hand, and means it when she does. "He's alive." Padmé closes her eyes. She does not look relieved. She looks like someone who has received information they don't yet have the capacity to process. When she opens them again, they are wet. "Is he?" She stops. Starts again. "Is he still?" "I don't know yet," Ahsoka says. Because that is the honest answer. Because Padmé has always deserved honest answers, and today is not the day to start offering her comfort instead of truth. Padmé's hand tightens on hers. Outside the partition, a droid calls something in a clipped procedural tone. Inside the bay, it is quiet enough to hear both of them breathing. Ahsoka. Her voice is very low now. The monitors at the bed's edge have begun a low, persistent recalibration that the droids respond to without alarm, and which is therefore alarming. "If he comes back." "When?" Ahsoka says. Padmé looks at her. The look is complicated. Gratitude and doubt, and something that might, in a different body with more life in it, become an argument. "When he comes back," Ahsoka says, steadier, "I will not let him stay in the dark." She means it as a promise. It comes out as a vow, which is different. A vow has weight in the chest, an anchor point, something the rest of the future attaches itself to. She feels it settle as she says it. Padmé exhales. Her hand loosens fractionally, not releasing, just relaxing. The tension going out of it like a question that has received its answer and no longer needs to be held so tightly. She says Anakin's name once, very quietly, to no one in the room. Then, she is gone. Obi-Wan is in the corridor outside when it happens. He does not need to be told. He feels it, not through any bond that should still be active, but through the Force itself, which does not require permission to transmit a loss of this magnitude. He puts one hand flat against the corridor wall. He stands there. His shoulders drop 3 centimeters and do not come back up. Ahsoka comes out of the bay and finds him like this, and does not touch him. She stands beside him. They look at the transparent steel partition, at the droids moving quietly inside, at the monitors settling into different configurations. Somewhere down the corridor, in a separate room, 2 infants are crying. The sound carries through the rock and the recycled air and the medical-grade silence of Polis Massa with absolute clarity. 2 voices, distinct already, one higher, one with a rougher edge, filling the space that has just been made by the absence of their mothers. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka stand in the corridor and listen and do not speak. There is nothing to say that is large enough for the moment, and they are both too honest to say something small. Ahsoka goes to Anakin's bay alone. The surgical team has finished. The droids have stepped back into standby positions. The ray-shielded bed hums at a low frequency she can feel through the floor. Maintaining the sterile field around a body that has been, against significant probability, stabilized, he does not look like Anakin. He does not look like Vader. He looks like something the galaxy tried very hard to destroy, and has not yet finished deciding what to do with. The monitor beside the bed traces a line that rises and falls with mechanical steadiness. It is the most functional thing in the room. She pulls the single chair to the bed's edge and sits. She does not reach through the ray shield. Not yet, not until the droid's clear contact. She looks at his face, which even beneath the burns and the ash and the stillness of sedation, is still his face. Still the face of the person who taught her everything she knows about flying and stubbornness, and the particular violence of caring about something too much. Down the corridor, the twins are still crying. Anakin's chest rises. Falls, rises, the monitor traces its line. Ahsoka leans forward, rests her elbows on her knees, and looks at the flickering readout and at the face above it, and understands with the specific clarity that only arrives after catastrophe that surviving Mustafar was not the ending of anything. It was the first step of something she does not have a name for yet. She stays anyway. Yoda arrives like weather, not with noise, not with announcement, simply present in a doorway where he was not before, his robes the same undyed gray as the asteroid rock. His ears carrying the particular stillness of a being who has been listening to this corridor for longer than anyone realized. He is 900 years old, and he moves like something that has stopped needing to hurry, because it has already seen where everything ends. He looks at Obi-Wan first. Obi-Wan is in the corridor outside Anakin's bay, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall and his forearms on his knees, looking at nothing. He has been sitting there for 2 hours. He looks up when Yoda's shadow reaches him, and something in his face, some last structural element, nearly gives way before he gets it back under control. "Master," he says. Yoda does not respond to the greeting. He looks through the transparasteel partition at the figure in the ray-shielded bed, and his eyes carry something that is not surprise. Surprise would be almost easier. What his eyes carry is recognition, the specific exhausted recognition of a being who feared this exact shape of event for years, and did not find a way to prevent it. "Stabilized," Yoda says. Not a question. For now, Obi-Wan gets to his feet. His joints protested in ways that have nothing to do with his age. The droids say he will not require the suit. His lungs are not the concern. Yoda turns from the partition. His gaze moves to Ahsoka, who is standing 3 meters away with her arms crossed and her chin at an angle that Obi-Wan has learned. In the last several hours. Means she has already decided something, and is waiting to see if anyone is going to require her to say it out loud. Yoda looks at her for a long moment. She looks back. "Young Tano," he says. "Master Yoda," she says. The title is precise and courteous, and carries no warmth whatsoever. The conference chamber is 4 doors down from the medical wing, a small room carved from the same asteroid rock as everything else, a table with 6 chairs, a single overhead light. Bail Organa is already there when they enter, standing at the far wall with his hands clasped behind his back. He looks like a man who has been doing the mathematics of catastrophe for the last 3 hours, and has not found a sum he can live with yet. Yoda takes the chair at the table's head without ceremony. Obi-Wan sits. Ahsoka does not sit. She stands at the chamber's edge, near the door, which she leaves open. Nobody asks her to close it. "What lies in that bed?" Yoda begins, and his voice in the small chamber is very quiet and very final, is not a wounded man awaiting recovery. A wound in the Force he is. The deepest I have felt in 900 years of living. He folds his hands over his Geimer stick. Survived Mustafar, he has. Physically, but the dark side does not release what it has claimed simply because the body endures. He was conscious on the transport, Ahsoka says. Intermittently, there's still. Consciousness is not what concerns me. Yoda looks at her. And the look is not unkind, which makes it harder. A man may be conscious and be entirely lost, young one. The force around him is corrupted, deeply. What emerges from that bed, if it emerges, I cannot say with certainty that it is Anakin Skywalker. Then we find out, Ahsoka says. We don't execute someone to avoid finding out. The word sits in the chamber. Nobody had said it yet. She has just said it. And the room rearranges itself around the word the way rooms do when something true and terrible gets named. Yoda does not flinch. Execute is a cruel framing for, what would you call it? Ahsoka. Obi-Wan's voice is a warning. She turns to look at him, and the look she gives him is not hostile. It is something more specific than hostile. It is the look of someone who needs to know, right now, which side of this room he is standing on. Obi-Wan looks at the table. Yoda continues. Permanent, deep stasis, I was prepared to suggest. Humane, secure, a containment of the threat until... Until what? She steps away from the door. Not toward Yoda, not yet. Just away from the wall, into the room's center, where the light catches the ash still ground into her lekku. Until you were more comfortable? Until it was convenient to revisit? I've met people in the Order's version of temporary containment. Master Yoda. I was almost one of them. The chamber goes very quiet. Bail Organa looks at the wall. Yoda's ears lower 1 degree, not submission, just the physical acknowledgement that a point has landed. Your situation was different, he says. How? She says it without inflection. Not a challenge. A genuine, patient question that has a very short list of acceptable answers. You were innocent, Yoda says. So was he, she says. Before we failed him. It is Obi-Wan's silence that breaks it open. He has been staring at the table since the word execute entered the room, and now Ahsoka turns to look at him again, and this time her voice is quieter. The sharp edge in it goes somewhere else. He considered you a father, she says. Not a master. Not a superior. A father. Whatever Palpatine did, and he spent years doing it, while we watched and called it Anakin's emotional instability. It worked because the Order left the gaps that let it work. She stops. Lets that sit. Then, the same philosophy that kept you at arm's length from him is sitting in that chair right now telling us to finish the job. Obi-Wan's jaw tightens. A muscle moves in his temple. Yoda speaks carefully. Hear what you are saying, Ahsoka. I do. Felt it myself. I have. The failure, the blindness, the cost of what we chose not to see. But this same attachment you offer now as remedy. Attachment is what blinded us to what he was becoming. No. She says it gently, which is somehow worse than if she'd said it hard. Attachment didn't blind the Order. The Order never attached in the first place. You kept him at a distance and called it protection, and Palpatine walked straight into the space you left. She looks at Yoda directly, not defiantly, but with the specific steadiness of someone who has lived the argument they are making. Abandoning people the moment they become inconvenient to love isn't wisdom. It's the thing that let this happen. Yoda is silent for a long time. He looks at Ahsoka. He looks at Obi-Wan. He looks at the wall beyond Bail Organa's shoulder, where the asteroid rock is old and dark and utterly indifferent to the particular grief of this room. Agree with you. I do not, he says finally. But right you may be. He rises from the chair. He is very small in the chamber's center, and very old, and carries the particular weight of a being who has spent centuries being the answer and is only now, in this stripped-down rock room with the medical monitors faintly audible through the open door, beginning to understand the cost of it. He moves toward the exit. He stops at the threshold. What you carry forward from this moment, he says, to the room, to Obi-Wan specifically. Heavier than you know it will be. He does not say it as a warning. He says it as the only gift he has left, which is the truth spoken plainly by someone old enough to mean it. May the Force be with you, Ahsoka Tano. He leaves. His footsteps recede down the corridor and do not come back. Bail Organa speaks for the first time in 40 minutes. I can have a transport ready in 6 hours, he says. Clean registration, no beacon, routed through 3 relay points. Whatever world you choose, I never knew the destination. He looks at Ahsoka. I will find the children placements. Safe ones. Ones he doesn't know about yet. When, he's well enough to be told. Ahsoka nods. She looks at Obi-Wan. He is still looking at the table. But his hands, she notices, have shifted, no longer flat and still, but loosely folded, the way hands look when someone has just, quietly, without announcing it, made a decision. 6 hours, he says. It is not absolution. It is not certainty. It is a man who can no longer stomach being the instrument of one more death, choosing the only remaining alternative, which is to stay. Ahsoka lets out a breath she has been holding since the Ridge. The world they choose has no name in any Imperial registry. It exists in the Outer Rim's quieter margins as a set of coordinates and a classification tag. Class M, temperate, low population density, no strategic value, and it is beautiful in the specific, indifferent way of places that have never been asked to be anything other than what they are. Conifer forests that run unbroken from the foothills to the snowline. Rivers cold enough to ache. A sky that goes genuinely dark at night, crowded with stars that nobody has named, because nobody important has ever looked up at them from here. They build the homestead from what Bale's contacts provide and what their own hands can manage, which turns out to be more than either of them expected, and less than what the situation requires. The main structure is stone and timber, low-ceilinged, built into a hillside for thermal mass. Anakin's room is in the interior, no windows, a reinforced door, and along 2 walls, nutrient frames housing a pair of Isalamiri, sourced at significant cost through 3 intermediaries and installed without explanation to anyone outside the 3 of them. The frames were Obi-Wan's idea. Ahsoka didn't argue. The first season is the worst. This is not a clean statement. It doesn't mean the seasons that follow are easy, or that the worst of the first season has a specific ending point she can identify in retrospect. It means that in those first months, before the crude prosthetics arrive and before the sedation protocols are adjusted, and before they understand the particular rhythm of his cycles, there are days when the homestead feels less like a refuge and more like a structure built around something that is trying to burn its way out. He doesn't speak for the first 6 weeks. Not silence. Not the voluntary silence of a man choosing not to engage. The absence of speech as a symptom. A gap where language used to be. The dark side filling the space where words aren't with something rawer and less controlled. Objects move without his apparent intent. A tin cup crosses the room and hits the far wall at 3 a.m, and Ahsoka is through the reinforced door in 4 seconds, and finds him sitting on the floor with his knees drawn up, and his mechanical hand pressed flat against the stone like he is trying to push himself into the ground. She sits across from him. She doesn't speak either. She stays until his breathing changes, and the cup stops vibrating against the baseboard, and the force settles back to its baseline churn. Then, she goes back to bed. She does this 11 times in the first 6 weeks. The prosthetics arrive mid-autumn, routed through Bale's network in 3 separate shipments to avoid pattern recognition. They are not elegant, functional durasteel, basic neural interface, the kind of work a competent but uninspired mechanic produces when operating under budget and time constraints. Obi-Wan fits them while Ahsoka keeps watch at the door. And it takes 4 hours and 2 broken interface calibrations and 1 episode that puts a crack in the stone wall behind the bed. And at the end of it, Anakin has 3 limbs again and looks at them like they belong to someone else. He uses the arm 2 days later to throw a bowl of food at the door. Ahsoka picks up the bowl. She fills it again. She sets it back inside the door and latches it behind her. She does not react. This is a policy, not an instinct. And there are moments when holding to it costs more than she anticipated when she made it. She made it anyway because she has watched enough field trauma to know that reaction, anger, hurt, withdrawal is exactly what the dark side in its current configuration is fishing for, and she will not be the one who bites. He finds language again in the 3rd month, which means the first words he speaks to her are an accusation. You should have left me on that rock. He says it on a gray afternoon in early winter, when she is changing the burn dressings on his back, a task he cannot perform himself yet, and which requires therefore a degree of physical proximity he tolerates rather than accepts. His voice is raspy, diminished from the smoke damage, but present. Still his. She finishes the dressing. She smooths the edge of the wrap with 2 fingers. Probably, she says. He turns his head to look at her over his shoulder. This is not the answer he expected. She can see that in the fractional shift of his expression, the calculation interrupted. Whatever follow-through he had prepared suddenly without its target. I would have, he says. I know, she says. That's why I didn't. She takes the medical kit and leaves him with that. The accusations accumulate through winter. He blames her for Padmé. Not directly, not with the specific mechanics of cause and effect, because even in his current state he is intelligent enough to know those mechanics don't support the claim. He blames her the way grief needs someone to blame when the actual responsible parties are either dead or too enormous to hold the charge. He says Padmé's name in the context of Ahsoka's choices and watches, to see what it does to her face. She does not let him see what it does to her face. She is 17 years old. She has lost her master to the dark side, her order to fire and betrayal, a woman she loved as an older sister to a medical bay on an asteroid. And she is here in a stone room in an unnamed forest feeding a man who is using Padmé as a weapon because he has nothing else with edges left. She knows this. The knowing does not make it cost less. What it costs her, she pays in the corridor outside his door, after she has latched it behind her and walked 12 steps away and pressed her back against the cold stone wall in the dark. She sits on the floor and is whatever she needs to be, and then she stands up and goes back to the kitchen and starts the next task. This is not martyrdom. She has examined it for that specifically, because she is aware of what martyrdom looks like from the inside, and it does not look like a choice made clearly. This looks like a choice made clearly. She is here because she decided to be here, and that decision has a reason behind it that doesn't require his gratitude or his contrition to remain true. She stays anyway. Spring arrives and brings the argument with it. It begins in the kitchen at 6 a.m, Obi-Wan at the counter, hands around a cup that has gone cold, not drinking it. Ahsoka at the table with a calibration tool she has been using on the neural interface settings because the left prosthetic knee is misfiring on inclines. The argument does not begin about Anakin. It begins about the water filtration unit and escalates because they are both too tired for the distance between what they are actually saying and what they mean to remain navigable. You are going to exhaust yourself into uselessness, Obi-Wan says. That is not noble. That is a liability. I'm not asking for your assessment of my coping mechanisms, she says, without looking up from the calibration tool. You're not coping. You're absorbing. He sets the cup down. There's a difference, and you know it. She sets the calibration tool down now. She looks at him. And your method is what? Exactly? Meditating in the shed for 3 hours every morning and coming out looking like it didn't work? The silence that follows is the specific silence of 2 people who have just said something true about each other and are deciding whether to keep going. Obi-Wan looks at the cold cup. Something in his face shifts, the composure apparatus failing briefly at the seams, just enough to see what is underneath it, which is not peace, and has not been peace for a very long time. I can't find it, he says. Quietly, meditation, I go in and I can't find the stillness. There's just the same things, in the same order, and they don't resolve. He stops. Detachment was supposed to prevent this. I know, she says. It didn't. I know. She picks the calibration tool back up. She does not offer comfort because he hasn't asked for comfort, and she respects him too much to give him something he didn't ask for. She lets the acknowledgement be what it is, which is enough. The night that ends the chapter is a still one. Deep winter circling back. The forest outside the homestead locked in frost. She hears him through the door at 3:30 hour. Not objects moving. Not the dark side surging. Just sound, low, broken, the specific register of a person crying who has stopped believing anyone can hear and has therefore stopped trying to control it. She stands in the corridor with her hand on the latch. She opens the door and goes in. She sits against the far wall, a meter from where he is facing the corner, and she doesn't speak, and she doesn't touch him, and she doesn't leave. Outside, the frost settles. The stars come out over the unnamed forest. patient and impersonal, and very far away. She stays until he goes quiet. Then, she stays a little longer. 4 years changes the light. Not metaphorically, literally. The angle of the sun through the homestead's east-facing windows arrives differently in the 4th year, the planet's axial tilt shifting the morning gold by a few degrees, enough that it now reaches the kitchen table at breakfast and doesn't in spring. Small astronomical fact, entirely irrelevant to the war being conducted inside the interior room, 3 doors down. Ahsoka notices it anyway, because she has learned to notice small things when the large ones are too heavy to hold directly. Luke and Leia are 4 years old. They live in the homestead's east wing, Ahsoka's designation, unofficially, because it gets the morning light, and because the east wing has a door that closes and a yard that is fenced and safe and visible from the kitchen window. They know Ahsoka as Ahsoka. They know Obi-Wan as Ben, which he arrived at without discussion, and which Ahsoka has never commented on, because she understands what a name costs when you change it. They know the interior room's door is closed, and they do not ask why in any way that requires a direct answer, because 4-year-olds in a household where the adults are careful learn quickly which doors have a weight behind them. They are curious anyway. This was, in retrospect, entirely predictable. It is a Tuesday in late autumn, an ordinary morning, overcast, the forest muffled by low cloud. And Ahsoka is 40 meters from the homestead when it happens. She is at the property's edge checking a perimeter sensor that flagged a possible malfunction overnight. Obi-Wan is in the shed doing maintenance on the speeder. The twins are in the east yard where she left them, under instruction to stay inside the fence. This is an instruction they follow reliably. They are 4. The sensor is not malfunctioning. A branch fell on it. She clears the branch and resets the unit and turns back toward the homestead, and she feels it before she sees it, a flicker in the force, from the homestead's interior that has a specific quality she has become an expert in reading over the last 4 years. Dark and turning. She runs. What happened, reconstructed afterward from 2 small eyewitness accounts and physical evidence. Leia found the interior corridor because the East Wing's connecting door was unlatched. Obi-Wan's error, discovered 1 hour too late. Luke followed Leia because Luke always follows Leia, a pattern already so established at 4 years old that it has the weight of natural law. They walk down the interior corridor, which smells different from the rest of the homestead. The Asalamiri frames have a faint organic undertone the children have asked about once and not pressed further, and they stopped outside the reinforced door. The door was not fully latched. It never is, from the inside. This was a design decision made 4 years ago that Ahsoka still believes is the right one, and which has cost her considerably more sleep than the alternative would have. Leia pushed it open. The room is dark when they enter. Dark because Anakin keeps it dark, the single window covered. The overhead light disconnected at the fixture after an incident in the 2nd year that left the fitting in 3 pieces and has not been repaired. The only light comes from the doorway behind them, a rectangle of corridor gray falling across the stone floor. He is in the corner. He is not in one of his episodes, not the kind with objects moving and the air pressure changing, and the force turning the room into something a trained force-sensitive feels before they see. He is in the other kind, which is quieter and in some ways worse, sitting with his back against the wall, knees up, mechanical arm on his knee. A particular quality of stillness that means he has been here for hours and has not found a reason to move. He hears the door. His head comes up. His eyes, in the darkness, are yellow. Not fully, not the flat absolute amber of the worst episodes, more like amber bleeding into something that used to be blue, the color shifting at the edges, unstable. He looks at the rectangle of light and at the 2 small shapes in it, and his face does something complex and fast that Ahsoka, arriving at the corridor's end 30 seconds later, will read in retrospect from the room's force signature rather than from observation. He tries to use it. This is the cruelest and most honest way to describe it. He summons what he has, the Sith's learned reflex of intimidation, darkness weaponized into a tool that clears rooms and keeps distances, and he aims it at the doorway where his children are standing. A controlled release. A warning. The force equivalent of a sound designed to frighten something small away before it gets any closer. Leia looks at him. She does not move. This is the moment. If the chapter has a hinge, it is here, in the space between his reaching out with darkness and her simply not receiving it. She is 4 years old. She has her mother's eyes and her father's obstinacy, and a force sensitivity that nobody in the homestead has discussed out loud yet, because it is in the category of things that are true and too large to name right now. She does not know what she is looking at. She does not know who the scarred man in the corner is. Not really. Not with the weight of it that the adults in her life carry. She knows he is the person the door is closed for. She knows his face is not like other faces. She knows he is looking at her. She steps forward across the light's edge into the room's dark. She reaches out. Her hand finds his mechanical one, the right, the durasteel, the one that is cold to the touch in a way no organic hand ever was, and she wraps her fingers around 2 of his as far as they will go, which is not far, because she is 4, and the hand is large, and built for a different scale of world entirely. She does not say anything. She looks at him with 0 fear and 0 judgment, with the absolute uncomplicated attention of a child who has decided this person is interesting, and that is enough reason to be here, and she does not let go. The darkness does not blast away. It does not shatter. It does not do anything cinematic or sudden. It collapses. Quietly, from the inside. The way a structure fails not because something strikes it, but because the thing it was built around is no longer there. Anakin looks at the small hand on his mechanical fingers and cannot reconcile it. This is the precise mechanism his mind reaches for the Sith architecture, the rage, the contempt, the cultivated belief that everything soft is a weakness, and every weakness is a wound waiting to happen, and it finds it cannot hold the architecture and this at the same time. The child is not afraid. The child has looked directly at what he is and reached out anyway. There is no framework in the dark side for this. The dark side was built on the premise that love is conditional, that it calculates costs, that it withdraws when withdrawal is rational. This is not withdrawing. This is a 4-year-old girl holding his mechanical hand in the dark, because she felt like it. He looks at her. His eyes change, not instantly. Over the length of 4 breaths, his own, counted because he is suddenly counting them. Because counting is something to hold on to, the amber drains from the edges. Blue appears at the iris's outer ring, reclaims territory inward. The yellow retreats to the pupil's edge and then is gone. His breathing slows. Then it catches. Then it breaks. Luke, who has been standing in the doorway, steps in when he hears it. He does not know why. He sits down on the floor next to his sister without ceremony, with the practical logic of a 4-year-old determining that if something is happening it is better to be near it, and looks up at Anakin's face with an expression of pure, patient curiosity. Anakin looks at both of them. The sound that comes out of him has no precedent in the last 4 years of the homestead's sonic history, not the dark side's rage and not the catatonic silence, and not even the crying she has heard through the door. It is something underneath all of those things. Something that was there before any of it, preserved in whatever part of him the dark side couldn't fully reach. He says Padmé's name. Once. Just that. In the voice she remembers from before Mustafar, roughened now by burns and years and everything between, but unmistakably his. Then he draws both children against his chest with his one mechanical arm, folding them in as far as it can reach, his prosthetic legs shifting on the stone floor to make the angle work. And his face goes into the dark above their heads, and he weeps in a way that sounds like something enormous finally, after 4 years of pressure, giving way. Ahsoka reaches the doorway. She stops. She takes in the room, the dark, the 2 small shapes folded into the larger one, the quality of the Force, which is not clean and not healed, but is, for the first time since Mustafar, pointed in a direction she recognizes, toward the light. She does not go in. She does not need to. She puts her back against the corridor wall beside the open door and slides down it until she is sitting on the floor, and she presses the back of her hand against her mouth, and she breathes. Behind her, inside the room, she hears her master's son hold his children, and finally, begin to come back. Spring comes early in the 5th year. The snow line retreats up the ridge by 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and the forest below it greens so fast, you can almost see it moving if you sit at the kitchen window long enough at the right time of morning. Ahsoka has started doing this, sitting with her hands around a cup that goes cold, because she forgets to drink it. Watching the tree line. It is not meditation. It is not strategy. It is just sitting, which she has gotten better at over the last several months, as the homestead's internal weather has slowly, non-linearly, and with significant setbacks, begun to change. The reinforced door is open most days now. Not removed. Open. A distinction she didn't realize would matter, until it did. He asks to see Obi-Wan first. This surprises her, though it shouldn't. Anakin has always processed things in the order they cost him most, which she recognizes as courage, even when it looks like stubbornness, and Obi-Wan is the harder conversation by a specific and measurable margin. She gives them the main room and takes the twins to the yard, and does not listen, which costs her something she doesn't try to quantify. Obi-Wan sits across from him at the kitchen table with his hands flat on the wood, and his face arranged in an expression that Ahsoka would recognize as his composure apparatus, full deployment if she were there to see it. He is there to see it. That is something. I don't know how to do this, Anakin says. His voice is still raspy 5 years on. The smoke damage left a permanent roughness in the lower registers that she suspects he will carry for the rest of his life. Right now it makes him sound younger than he is. I've been trying to think of the right words for 6 months, and I don't have them. Then don't use the right words, Obi-Wan says. Anakin looks at him. Something in the look is 17 years old. I handed myself to him, he says. I knew what he was, and I knew what it would cost, and I did it anyway because I was terrified and there was nobody I could. He stops. The mechanical hand on the table closes into a fist and opens again. I told myself it was for Padmé, and it was. But it was also because I didn't believe there was anything worth saving in the galaxy that wasn't her, and that's another stop. That's my failure. Not yours. I spent a long time trying to make it yours, and I'm done with that. Obi-Wan's face does something complicated and fast. I left you on that bank, he says. It comes out raw, not recited, not managed, just the thing itself. I walked up that slope and I left you burning, and I told myself the code gave me permission, and I have not. His voice breaks at the seam. He does not repair it immediately, which is new. I have not found a meditation in 5 years that makes that sit correctly. Because it doesn't sit correctly. Because it was wrong. You came back, Anakin says. Ahsoka came back, Obi-Wan says. I came back because she wouldn't let me not. I know. Anakin looks at him steadily. That's not what I said. The distinction takes a moment to arrive. When it does, Obi-Wan closes his eyes, and the thing that has been assembled over his grief for 5 years and 900 years of Jedi doctrine comes down in sections. Not all at once. Piece by piece, like a structure being carefully dismantled by someone who finally has permission. When he opens his eyes, they are wet. He stands up from the table. He crosses the 3 meters between them, and he puts his arms around Anakin Skywalker and holds on, and it is not the formal embrace of a master acknowledging an apprentice. It is a man who was told his whole life that holding on was the source of suffering, choosing, at 43 years old, to believe something different. Anakin's arm comes up after a moment, the one arm he has, mechanical and certain, and it holds. They stay like that for longer than either of them would have predicted, and the kitchen holds the silence of it without comment. And outside the window, the tree line is very green. She is sitting on the yard fence when he finds her. Not the fence's functional side, the outside edge, feet dangling above the ground, face toward the forest. The twins are inside with Obi-Wan, who has discovered, to everyone's collective surprise including his own, that he is competent with children when he stops trying to manage the interaction from a formal distance. Anakin stops 2 meters away. He stands there. You could sit on the fence, she says. Or you could stand there until I acknowledge you. Either's fine. He sits on the fence. They look at the forest for a while. A bird she has never identified, brown, medium-sized, aggressively territorial, issues its claim from the canopy and receives a response from somewhere deeper in the trees. The exchange repeats twice, and then resolves. Small drama. Concluded. I blamed you for Padmé, he says. I know. I said things about her death that were. I know what you said. He is quiet. The mechanical hand rests on the fence post between them. She looks at it, not at his face. She asked me to promise, Ahsoka says. At Polis Massa. She wanted to know if you were alive, and I told her yes, and she asked if you were coming back. And I told her. She stops. I told her I wouldn't let you stay in the dark. He doesn't speak. I need you to understand that I didn't stay for you, she says. Not entirely. I stayed because I told her I would. Because she was dying, and she asked me for the one thing I could actually give her, and I gave her my word. She looks at him now. And also because you are the closest thing I have ever had to a family, and I was not going to stand at the top of a ridge and watch you burn and call it acceptance. Both of those things are true at the same time. The bird in the canopy makes its claim again. No response this time. I'm sorry, Anakin says, for Padmé. For what I said about her, and what I said to you. For, he exhales through his nose. For 5 years of taking the worst of it out on the only person who stayed close enough to receive it. Ahsoka is quiet for a moment. People, she says, are worth more than the worst thing they've done. She says it simply, without emphasis, the way you say a thing that has been true in your chest for long enough that it no longer needs decoration. That includes you. It also included me. When the council decided otherwise, I knew that then because I chose to believe it, not because the evidence was obviously in my favor. She looks back at the forest. I'm not interested in forgiveness as a transaction. I'm interested in what you do next. He nods. Once, the kind of nod that means something arrived. She starts teaching him the week after. Not combat forms, not yet, maybe never in the same configuration. His body is a different instrument now, and she is not his master. And that relationship has been replaced by something without a formal name in Jedi tradition. She teaches him what Qui-Gon taught through Anakin once, distantly, in the spaces between combat lessons. The living force. The present tense. The difference between reaching outward for power and simply opening inward to what is already there. They sit in the yard in the mornings while the frost is still on the grass. She tells him to feel the ground. Just the ground, the cold of it through the thin fabric. The slight unevenness of the earth, the way it pushes back. The force in the immediate, physical, concrete, not the galaxy, not the future, not the war he won and lost and the one that is still running somewhere out in the dark beyond the tree line. Just the ground. He is bad at this for 3 weeks. Then he isn't. The sessions lengthen without discussion, the way things do when they are working. She does not grade them. She does not compare them to anything that came before. She simply shows up in the yard at first light and he is already there, sitting in the frost, and they begin. Some mornings Leia watches from the east wing window. She does not ask to join and Ahsoka does not invite her. Not yet. Not because the invitation won't come, but because there is a right time for it, and this is not it. Luke watches too, occasionally from a different window, and his watching has a different quality. Less analytical, more interior, the look of someone recognizing something they didn't know they were looking for. Ahsoka notices both of them noticing, and files it in the part of herself that will need to address it eventually, and returns her attention to the frost, and the ground, and the man sitting in it. The Kyber crystal has been in his mechanical hand every morning for 2 months, when it changes. She sees it happen from the yard's edge. He is sitting cross-legged in the frost, the crystal flat on his palm, and she has learned to read the force quality of the sessions the way she reads weather. This morning has a particular clarity to it, a stillness that is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of something organized beneath it. The crystal is red. It has been red since Mustafar. Since before. Since the years the galaxy knew him by a different name and a different color of blade. Then it isn't. She watches the color leave it. Not dramatically. Not with light or heat or sound. Just the gradual departure of something that was forced there and has been waiting, she suspects, for permission to leave. What remains is white. Not the blue it was before. Not the green of some other life. White, clear, and complete, and its own thing entirely. The color of a decision made with full knowledge of the cost. She knows what it means. She has seen it before. In her own hands. In the crystals she carried out of a different darkness. A crystal healed from the inside, the bleeding undone not by force, but by the sustained, patient work of someone choosing differently, day after day, in the frost before the household wakes. He opens his eyes. He looks at it. He closes his hand around it and holds it, and says nothing. She says nothing either. The moment does not need witnesses. It has them anyway. Because that is the nature of moments like this, they do not ask permission. They simply occur, and the people present carry them forward into whatever comes next. Later in the afternoon, when the frost has melted and the twins are in the yard, and the unnamed planet's sun has found the kitchen window at its new spring angle, she looks outside and sees him sitting in the grass with Luke on one knee and Leia on the other, his scarred face tilted up toward the light, eyes closed. Leia is talking, she is always talking, the words precise and rapid and trailing into questions the way her mother's did, the cadence so familiar that Ahsoka has to look away from it sometimes. Luke has his head tipped back at the same angle as his father's, face toward the sky, eyes also closed, and she does not know if he is imitating, or if something in him simply recognizes the posture as correct. Anakin's mechanical hand rests open on his knee, palm up. The white crystal is in it. He stays like that for a long time. The sun moves. He doesn't. The light finds all three of them in the grass, and the yard is very quiet, and the forest beyond the fence line continues in its own slow, indifferent green business. And it is, Ahsoka thinks, watching from the kitchen window with her cold cup, an ordinary afternoon on an unnamed world. She means this as the highest possible praise. 13 years changes a galaxy. The Empire does not announce itself with a single catastrophic transformation it sediments. Layer by layer, regulation by regulation, checkpoint by checkpoint, until the weight of it is so evenly distributed across every system and sector and shipping lane that most beings stop feeling it as pressure and start feeling it as gravity. The natural order of things. The way it has always been, for anyone young enough that 13 years constitutes most of their conscious memory. Luke and Leia are 13. The homestead has expanded in the years since the reinforced door came down. A second structure went up 4 years ago, a workshop, Anakin's, where he rebuilds things that come to him broken and sends them back into the world functional, which is the closest thing to a philosophy he has articulated out loud. A garden runs along the south wall, tended primarily by Leia with occasional interference from Luke, who has strong opinions about where the root vegetables should go, and a track record that does not support his confidence. The perimeter sensors have been upgraded 3 times. The speeder has been upgraded twice. The security protocols are reviewed every 6 months, rotated, updated, reviewed again. This is Obi-Wan's contribution to the household's daily texture, the vigilance, maintained without drama, that keeps the rest of it possible. He rises before the household and checks the overnight sensor logs with his morning cup, and he has never once found anything in 13 years. And he checks them anyway. On a Tuesday in early spring he finds something. It is not obvious. That is the point of it. The surveillance methodology of the Inquisitorius is not, at its operational best, obvious. What Obi-Wan finds is a pattern across 3 weeks of logs. A ship. Different registration each pass. Different approach vector. But the same mass signature within a margin that his 13 years of morning vigilance have made him precise enough to catch. 3 passes. Triangulating, he does not tell the twins at breakfast. He waits until they are in the workshop with Anakin, Luke working on a motivator housing that has been technically complete for 2 weeks, but which he keeps finding reasons to refine. Leia reading at the workbench with the focused intensity of someone who treats a technical manual the same way other people treat recreational literature. And then he goes to find Ahsoka. She is on the roof. She does this, has done it for years, the elevated position and the open sky and the unobstructed sensor range. She is not meditating. She is watching the cloud layer above the northern ridge with an expression he recognizes. How long, she says, before he reaches the roof's edge. He sits beside her. He shows her the logs on the datapad. She studies them for 40 seconds, which is long enough for someone of her processing speed to be sure, and then she hands it back. 3 weeks, she says. At minimum, there may be earlier passes I read as random traffic. There aren't. She says it with the flat certainty of someone who has been feeling it in the Force for longer than the sensor logs go back, and did not want to be right. I've been sensing something for 6 weeks. I kept deciding it was residual. The war. The Inquisitors working elsewhere. I wanted it to be elsewhere. Obi-Wan looks at the northern ridge. It isn't elsewhere. No, they sit with this for a moment. How did they find us? She says. It is not quite a question. Obi-Wan is quiet. Then, he can't suppress it. Not fully. He never could. His signature in the Force is simply too large. We moved twice in the first 3 years, and both times I told myself the new location bought us permanent cover, and both times he stops. Hopeful rather than accurate. We've had 13 years, Ahsoka says. Yes, that's not nothing. No, he says, it isn't. They tell Anakin that evening. The 3 of them, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Anakin, in the main room after the twins are nominally in bed, which means Luke is in bed, and Leia is in bed reading with a light she believes nobody knows about. Anakin takes the datapad. He reads the logs with the same speed and precision that 13 years of domestic life has not touched, the military analyst underneath the scarred hands and the worn homespun, and he sets it down on the table. The Grand Inquisitor, Obi-Wan says. Almost certainly. The triangulation methodology is consistent with what we know of his operational approach. How many in a standard deployment? The Inquisitor and a support team. 2 ships, typically, possibly 3 given the signature we're tracking. Anakin nods. His face is doing the tactical assessment thing, the quality of attention that narrows and sharpens and moves through options in rapid sequence. She has seen this face in war rooms. She has not seen it in this kitchen for 13 years, and seeing it now produces something complex in her chest that is not entirely dread. We run, he says. It is not a question. We take the twins and Bale's emergency contact protocol and we can't run, Ahsoka says. He looks at her. We've moved twice. Both times it bought us 3 to 4 years before they triangulated again. The twins are 13, they're not children we can pack into a cargo hold at 3 in the morning anymore. Leia will want a plan, and Luke will want to help execute it. She pauses. Also, your signature doesn't get smaller. Wherever we go, they follow. Eventually, the kitchen is quiet. Obi-Wan speaks carefully. We could make a stand here. The terrain is favorable. We know it. And they don't. 2 lightsabers against a small Inquisitor team in ground we understand. 2, Anakin says. The word is precise. Its precision is the point. Ahsoka looks at him. You're not. I'm not going to fight. He says it without heat, without the defensive edge the sentence would have carried 2 years ago. Just the statement. Clean. That's not. I made a decision. About what I am now and what I'm not, and taking up a blade against. We're not asking you to, she says. I'm telling you 2 sabers against an Inquisitor team is thin, and the geometry of this conversation matters. 2 will be enough, Obi-Wan says, with the particular confidence of a man who has assessed odds and chosen not to share his actual calculation. Ahsoka looks at him. She does not argue. They spend 3 days in preparation. The twins are told. This conversation happens in the main room with everyone present, which is Ahsoka's decision, and which Anakin supports without being asked. Leia receives the information with a stillness that is too old for 13, and asks 3 precise operational questions, 2 of which Obi-Wan can answer, and 1 of which requires him to revise his own assessment. Luke receives it with a different quality of stillness, less organizational, more interior, and asks 1 question when the operational debrief is complete. Are we leaving? Not yet, Ahsoka tells him. Maybe not at all. He nods. He goes outside. He comes back in 20 minutes later with the composure of someone who went outside specifically to deal with something, and has dealt with it. They spend 3 days adjusting the sensor perimeter, identifying the defensible angles, preparing the emergency extraction route for the twins regardless of outcome. Anakin reinforces the workshop structure from the inside, and says he is improving storage efficiency, and nobody argues with him. It comes on the 4th morning. The sensor array picks up the mass signatures at 0340. 2 ships. The drive signatures are military-grade, scrubbed of registry data, descending on a vector that avoids the main settlement zones. Precise, professional. The movement of something that has done this before. Ahsoka is awake before the alarm completes its first cycle. Obi-Wan 2 seconds behind her. They move through the homestead in the dark without lights, the floor plan of 13 years memorized past the point of needing them. Ahsoka gets the twins up. She gives Leia the emergency kit, packed, updated, reviewed 6 months ago, and tells them the extraction point, and the code phrase, and the meeting coordinates. Leia takes this with both hands, and holds it like the operational asset it is. Luke looks at Ahsoka's face, and then at the emergency kit, and then back at her face. "Come back," he says. "That's the plan," she says. She closes their door. In the main room, Obi-Wan is standing at the window, looking at the northern ridge where the cloud layer has the particular illumination of ships burning through it on descent. 2 columns of light, banking east. The forest below the ridge is dark and still, and full of things that do not know what is coming. He ignites his lightsaber. Blue light fills the kitchen and does not waver. Ahsoka ignites hers. Through the force she feels them coming, the Inquisitor's signature like a blade drawn and held, cold and precise and utterly certain of the outcome of the next hour. At the homestead's interior door, the one that leads to the workshop, she is aware without looking that Anakin Skywalker is standing in the frame. She does not look. She walks out into the dark. The forest receives them without ceremony. 2 ships have set down on the ridge's northern face. She can hear the cooling tick of the hulls through the trees, 200 meters up the slope, and she can feel the deployment through the force before the first figure clears the tree line. 6 ground personnel, combat trained, moving in the loose, disciplined spread of people who have done this specific thing many times, and ahead of them, moving alone, the signature she felt from the kitchen. The Grand Inquisitor does not move like his support team. His support team moves like soldiers. He moves like a theorem being demonstrated. He emerges from the trees 40 meters out, his figure resolving from dark into darker dark, and he stops when he sees them. He takes in Obi-Wan on the left, and Ahsoka on the right, and the homestead behind them with its windows dark, and he conducts what is visibly a brief assessment. Then he continues walking. 2 Jedi, he says. His voice carries the particular quality of someone who has learned to make quietness threatening. And the signature that led me here is inside that building, which means whoever you're protecting is not participating. He stops 20 meters out. Interesting tactical decision. We've made worse, Ahsoka says. He looks at her specifically. His pale face in the dark has the quality of something lit from below. Ahsoka Tano, you're not actually a Jedi. That's true, she says. I'm something else. He ignites his saber. The red blade describes a slow rotation, the double-ended spinning configuration, a weapon built as much for psychological effect as combat function. The support team fans left and right through the peripheral dark, establishing angles. Obi-Wan moves first. The early minutes are geometry. Ahsoka takes the support team, 4 of the 6, pulling them wide to keep them off Obi-Wan's flank, using the terrain the way 13 years of walking this ground has taught her. The low root shelf at 20 meters that disrupts footing if you don't know it's there. The boulder cluster at 40 that breaks sight lines. The creek bank at 60 that sounds passable and isn't. She is not trying to win against 4 simultaneously. She is trying to make 4 into a series of 1 at a time, which is a different problem. Behind her, the sound of Obi-Wan and the Grand Inquisitor finding each other's measure, the specific percussion of 2 high-level combatants making initial contact, assessing, withdrawing, the rhythm more information exchange than engagement. She cannot see it. She tracks it through the force. Obi-Wan is not losing. He is also not winning. The Grand Inquisitor fights with the Inquisitorious form, aggressive, relentless, designed specifically to overwhelm opponents who fight defensively, and Obi-Wan Soresu is the most defensive form in the Jedi repertoire. The Inquisitor has been trained to defeat Soresu. Obi-Wan has been practicing Soresu for 50 years. They are, in the Force's accounting, currently even, and even is not a sustainable position against an opponent whose backup is still operational. She disarms the first support operative at the root shelf and drives an elbow into the second's helmet with enough force to end his participation, and turns back toward the homestead to check the distance and sees the workshop door is open. She did not leave the workshop door open. The third operative gets between her and the homestead, and she deals with him efficiently and without grace, which is how she fights now, not the elegant jarkai of her teens, not performance, just outcome. And she gets clear of the trees and back to the yard's edge and sees the twins' extraction doors still closed. Which means they are where she put them, which means the open workshop door is something else. She knows what it is. She feels it before she finishes the thought. A presence in the force that she knows as well as her own, moving through the homestead's ground floor toward the main entrance, toward the sound of the fight outside. Not the signature he has carried for the last several years, settled and practicing and reaching toward light. Something older. The signature she felt for the first time when she was 14 years old, and he pulled her out of a bad angle in a training sequence, and told her to stop fighting like she was trying to impress someone, and start fighting like she was trying to win. Large, certain, absolutely, entirely focused. The main door opens. He is wearing the gray homespun he wears every day. No armor. No robes of rank. The mechanical arm is uncovered. He stopped covering it 2 years ago. A quiet decision that came without announcement, and which she understood immediately as a form of self-acceptance she had no wish to interrupt. His prosthetic legs carry him across the threshold with the particular economy of someone who has spent 8 years relearning how to move in a body that was rebuilt from necessity rather than design. His face carries the burn scarring across the left jaw and temple, and the asymmetry of his silhouette has been his silhouette for 13 years, and he looks nothing like Anakin Skywalker looked at his peak. In the war, in the halls of the temple, he looks more like himself than he ever did then. He reaches into the gray homespun at his chest. The white lightsaber ignites. It makes no sound that is different from any other lightsaber igniting. Same plasma, same magnetic containment, same fundamental physics. What is different is the color, which is not blue and not green and not the red of the blade he carried for the years the galaxy knew his name as Vader. It is white. Clear and cold and complete. The light of a decision with nothing left to prove. The Grand Inquisitor stops. He looks at the blade. He looks at the face above it. He completes the recognition. She can see the exact moment it arrives. A fractional stillness, a recalculation conducted in real time. That's, he begins. Yes, Anakin says. He does not fight like he used to. She knows his old forms the way she knows her own breathing. The Form V aggression, the forward pressure, the gem so that treated every duel as a problem to be solved through superior force, applied directly. What comes out of him now is nothing like that. It is gem so reduced to its absolute minimum. No flourish, no dominance display, no force applied beyond what each specific moment requires. A response to the Inquisitor's attack that redirects rather than opposes. An economy of movement that in a different context would read as restraint, and in this one reads as something more fundamental. He is not fighting from anger. She watches him move in the dark, and she understands it the way you understand a piece of music when you finally hear the instrument it was written for. This is what the last several years of mornings in the yard have been building toward. The living force made physical, the present tense attention that doesn't reach ahead for power or behind for rage, but simply responds to what is actually here. He is protecting. It is not the same action as fighting, performed more gently. It is a different action entirely. The Grand Inquisitor is better than almost anyone she has encountered. He has been trained specifically to kill people like Anakin Skywalker. His technique is refined and his footwork is excellent, and none of it touches the white blade, which is simply always where it needs to be, offered not as a threat, but as a fact. 3 exchanges. 4. The Inquisitor shifts his approach, the spinning double-blade configuration. Using the second end to force a defensive commitment, and Anakin steps inside the rotation without apparent urgency, and the double-blade configuration becomes a liability instead of an advantage, and the Grand Inquisitor is disarmed in a motion so unhurried, it takes her a full second to process that it has happened. He stands with the white blade at the Inquisitor's throat. He holds it there. He does not finish it. She knows, watching, that this is not mercy performed for an audience. He simply has no anger available to fuel the next motion, and without anger the motion doesn't come. What he has is the blade at a throat and a choice, and he makes it by stepping back. "Get your people and leave," he says. The Grand Inquisitor looks at him. The expression on his pale face is not one she has seen there before, not rage, not contempt. Something closer to the look of a calculation that has produced an answer the calculator doesn't know what to do with. He retrieves his weapon. He withdraws into the dark. The support team follows. She tracks them up the slope through the Force, controlled, organized withdrawal, not a rout. The retreat of professionals who have recorded what they found here, and will report it and what comes next, will be a different problem for a different day. The ships lift off the ridge and their lights climb through the cloud layer, and the sound of them fades until the forest's ambient texture reasserts itself, and then there is just the creak, and the wind in the conifers, and 3 people standing in the frost. Obi-Wan is bleeding from a cut above his left eye that looks worse than it is. He is looking at Anakin with an expression she has only seen on his face once before, at the top of a ridge on a burning planet, watching something he believed was impossible be done anyway. The twins' extraction door opens and Leia comes through it first, because of course she does, and takes the scene in with 3 quick sweeps, and then looks at her father. Standing in gray homespun with a white blade in his hand and the frost on the ground around his feet. She crosses to him. She takes his mechanical hand, the way she did when she was 4 years old in a dark room, and she holds it. He looks down at her. He extinguishes the blade. The white light goes out, and the dark comes back in, and the 4 of them stand in it together and breathe. And nobody says anything yet, because there is nothing that needs to be said more urgently than the simple fact of all of them still standing. Dawn arrives the way it always has on this unnamed world. Without announcement. Without drama. The darkness above the northern ridge softens by degrees, black to deep blue to the particular gray that precedes color, the forest emerging from it tree by tree as the light finds them in order of height. The creek sounds different in the morning quiet, something about the temperature change between night air and cold water producing a clearer resonance. She has heard it 13,000 mornings. She hears it now, sitting on the frost-covered steps of the main entrance, and it sounds exactly like itself. The ships are long gone. The yard shows what the night held, scorched earth at the tree line's edge where a blade met bark, a furrow in the frost where someone went down hard, the workshop door still open at its hinges. Nothing that won't be absorbed by the next rain. The forest does not hold the shape of what happened in it. It simply continues. Obi-Wan comes out and sits beside her with 2 cups and hands her one, and she wraps both hands around it and lets it be warm. "The cut needs closing," she says. "It stopped bleeding." "That's not what I said." He concedes this by not arguing, which is as close as he gets to agreement on matters of his own physical maintenance. They sit with the cups and the dawn and the particular silence of people who have been in the same fight and come out the other side of it, and don't need to narrate what just happened to make it real. "He'll come back," she says. "Not the Inquisitor. Palpatine. Yes, with more. Yes," she drinks. The cup is the same battered tin she has had for 13 years. Dented on the left side from a counter edge, the handle rewrapped in grip tape twice. She will take it when they leave. She will take almost nothing else. It was always going to come to this, Obi-Wan says. Not with resignation, with the tone of someone removing a last weight from a shelf they've been carrying. "We bought 13 years. That was never going to be the end of it." "No," she says. "But it was enough." He looks at her. "Luke can fix a motivator housing in the dark," she says. "Leia can read an Imperial sensor log and identify its vulnerabilities in under a minute." Anakin sat in the frost this morning for an hour before the ships came, and I could feel him through the Force like a lake. Just still. She looks at the tree line. 13 years was enough. Inside, the twins are at the kitchen table. Luke is eating with the focused efficiency of someone who has decided food is fuel for the thing that comes next. Leia has the emergency kit open in front of her. Not from anxiety, Ahsoka reads, but from the same impulse that makes her read technical manuals recreationally. Inventory. Assessment. She wants to know what she has. Anakin is at the counter. He is making breakfast. This is what he does when the household needs anchoring. Not speeches, not strategies, but the physical, present tense, living force practice of doing the next simple thing. Eggs from the yard flock, bread from the batch Obi-Wan started 2 days ago, the good oil that Bail's last supply run included. His mechanical hand moves through the familiar choreography with the ease of years, and he does not look like a man who held a white blade at a throat 6 hours ago. He looks like what he is, which is both things simultaneously, and has made his peace with the distance between them. Luke looks up when Ahsoka comes in. "Are we leaving today?" he asks. "Yes," she says. He nods. He goes back to eating. Leia looks up from the emergency kit. She has a question on her face that is not about logistics. She holds it for a moment, deciding. Ahsoka thinks, whether this is the time, and then she asks it. "Who was he?" she says. Not to Ahsoka. To the counter, to the gray homespun, to the scarred profile turned toward the pan. "Before, who were you?" The kitchen holds the question. Anakin sets down the spatula. He turns from the counter and looks at his daughter, at the brown eyes that are Padmé's, in the face that is shaping itself toward Padmé's bones, carrying his obstinacy in its jawline the way she carried it in hers. He pulls the chair across from her and sits. "I was Anakin Skywalker," he says. "I was a Jedi Knight, and then I was something the Jedi had never produced before and didn't know how to hold, and then I was something much worse than either." He puts his mechanical hand flat on the table between them. "I did things I cannot fix. Padmé, your mother, died because of what I chose, and there is no accounting that makes that sum come out differently." He says it directly, without the softening she might have used, because Leia has never once in 13 years responded to softening with anything other than the look of someone who knows they are being managed. "What I can tell you is that you and your brother exist because she loved me well enough to hope, and that every day I have had here has been a day I tried to be worth that." Leia looks at him for a long time. Then she closes the emergency kit and pushes it to the table's edge and reaches across and puts her hand over the mechanical one, the way she did at 4 years old in the dark, and she does not say anything. She doesn't need to. She has her mother's way with the things that matter most. She doesn't spend words on them. She simply acts, and the action is the whole sentence. Luke reaches over and puts his hand on top of hers. Anakin looks at his children's hands on his mechanical one, and his face does something that has no name in any formal language, only in the private vocabulary of people who believed for a long time that they had forfeited the right to moments like this, and have been proven wrong. They leave in the early afternoon. The homestead gets a final pass, nothing left that can identify them, nothing left that leads anywhere useful to anyone looking. The perimeter sensors are wiped. The workshop is locked. The Asalamiri frames are left where they are, the animals undisturbed, because they are living things that belong to the planet now regardless of what purpose they were brought here to serve. The East Wing's windows, where the morning light falls correctly in spring, are latched against the weather that will come whether anyone is here to see it or not. Obi-Wan stands in the main room for a moment before he closes the door. He looks at the kitchen table, the counter, the cup he left on the windowsill. 13 years of a life assembled from necessity and choice in equal measure, and he stands in it one last time without trying to summarize it, because some things are not improved by summary. He closes the door. Outside, the twins are already at the ship, Leia running a pre-flight check she was not asked to run, and Luke standing at the yard's edge looking at the tree line, storing something, the way he stores things, in the quiet interior place that is entirely his own. Anakin is at the foot of the ramp with his face turned toward the forest, and the frost still on the ground around his feet. And he stays like that for 30 seconds, and then he turns and walks up the ramp and does not look back. This is not because it doesn't cost him. It is because he has learned, over 13 years of mornings in the frost, the difference between honoring what a place held and being held by it. The homestead held everything. He carries it. Those are different things, and he knows the difference now, and he walks up the ramp. Ahsoka is the last one in. She stands in the yard for a moment. The frost, the fence, the bird she never identified calling its territorial claim from somewhere in the canopy above her, indifferent to departures. She looks at the East Wing windows. She looks at the workshop door, locked now, and at the main entrance closed, she looks at the yard where she taught him to feel the ground, and the fence where they sat and said the things that needed saying, and the kitchen window where she watched him in the grass with the twins, and the white crystal open in his palm. She picks up the battered tin cup from the step where she left it. She walks up the ramp. Bail Organa meets them at a coordinates-only rendezvous. Point 3 hyperspace jumps out, his ship running dark in the shadow of a gas giant that has no name in the current Imperial registry. He comes down the ramp when their ship docks, and he looks at all 5 of them in the bay, at Anakin specifically, standing in gray homespun with a white-hilted lightsaber at his hip. And the expression on his face is the expression of a man who has been carrying a long bet and has just been shown the outcome. He extends his hand. Anakin takes it. "There's a great deal of work," Bail says. "I know," Anakin says. "It won't be simple. There are people who will need convincing that the situation is what we say it is, that you are who you say you are now. I know that too." Bail looks at him for a moment longer. Something passes across his face, the weight of 13 years of careful, deniable hope, arriving now at the thing it was hoping for and finding it solid. Then he nods, the same single, decisive nod Ahsoka has seen him use in conference rooms when a decision has been made and the time for debate is over. "Then welcome," he says simply. "We can use you." Anakin looks at him steadily. "I know what I was," he says. "I'm not asking anyone to forget it. I'm asking for the chance to be useful in spite of it." Bail holds his gaze. "That," he says, "is exactly what a rebellion is for." The gas giant turns slowly in the viewport as Ahsoka sits in the forward cabin and watches it. Obi-Wan is in the seat beside her. Behind them, from the ship's small common space, she can hear the twins asking Bail questions. Leia's incisive and operational, Luke's quieter and wider in scope, both of them already mapping the shape of the thing they are joining. Anakin's voice, low and steady, occasionally adding something. Not leading. Contributing. The register of a man who has learned the difference. The gas giant is enormous and unhurried and entirely without opinion about the 5 people in the ship passing through its shadow. It has been here for 4 billion years. It will be here after the Empire has become whatever empires become when they finally run out of room to expand. It does not know their names. It turns anyway. Patient and massive, and lit from one side by a star too distant to feel. She thinks of a ridge above a lava river. She thinks of a promise made in a medical bay that smelled of recycled air and asteroid rock. She thinks of a door held open in the dark on a night when every lesson she had ever been given said to close it. She thinks of a cup of cold tea and 13,000 mornings and a bird she never learned the name of, still calling its claim from a canopy above an empty yard on an unnamed world. She does not think of it as sacrifice. She has never thought of it as sacrifice. You do not sacrifice the thing that turns out to be the point. Obi-Wan speaks without turning from the viewport. "Do you know where we're going?" he asks. Not tactically, not the coordinates or the contact point or the next 3 moves in the operational chain. He means it in the larger sense, the one that doesn't have a map. She thinks about it honestly, the way the last 13 years have taught her to think about things, without the comfort of false certainty, without the paralysis of its absence. "Forward," she says. He is quiet for a moment. "That's enough," he says. She nods. Outside the viewport, the gas giant continues its slow, enormous turning, and the star at its edge holds its distance, and the ship moves through the dark between them, and the dark is full of things that do not have names yet, and will, given enough time and enough people willing to stay, acquire them. The galaxy out there is still what it is. 13 years into an empire's tenure, the work long and the odds not simple and the outcome not guaranteed. But the ship is moving and the people in it are whole, and the work ahead is the kind of work that begins with a family that refused, when every rational calculation suggested otherwise, to let each other go. That is not nothing. It is, in fact, where everything starts. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.